This is Talking Points, and I'm David Matthews. You've most likely heard about Bitcoin and probably about the controversy surrounding it. Bitcoin is a very disruptive form of new technology that is related to the internet age and is probably the evolution of the internet in its whole new level. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is not only its potential for finance and the use of financial exchange, but it has brought about a new concept in distributed accounting that uses what's called the blockchain. The blockchain is really the foundation of both Bitcoin and many new applications that have arisen from it. The interesting thing is that Forbes, along with many other well-respected financial reporting organizations, are now starting to look at Bitcoin as being more than just a mild curiosity. Today with us we have Paul Snow. Paul is the founder of Factom, which is a company that has developed a blockchain application for business, and he's also the president of the Texas Bitcoin Conference. He has a Master's of Computer Science and a minor in electrical engineering from the Texas A&M University. We're very happy to have Paul with us here, and Paul, thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, great. Hey, Paul, we're going to talk a little bit about the Bitcoin conference in just a second, but I think it's kind of helpful for me and for everybody to get a little better understanding of really what the blockchain is and how it is a disruptive force in not only in finance but in a broader spectrum of business applications today.
Certainly. What the blockchain really does is provide a easy access to some technology that it has actually been developing over the last 30, 40 years, really, and particularly in the 80s and the 90s. And that is, how do I get multiple systems into a provably identical state? When your bank account says that you have $1,227.48, you want to be able to go to another ATM somewhere and maybe another branch of the same bank and see that same balance there. And that's called a consensus algorithm for moving information across computer systems. And it's a common thing. If you talk about benefits, if you talk about insurance, if you talk about finance, you talk about investment, all of these wide-ranging businesses rely on systems providing the same information to them that they do another party, whether that other party's literally on that system or on a different system. What the blockchain does is basically reduce all of that consensus process, proving that the data is correct, and moves it out of the computer system and puts it into some visible, transparent mechanism that everybody can look at. And the first application for the blockchain was Bitcoin, and basically it maintains the balances of your Bitcoin. That's really the only value Bitcoin has, and that is if you look at the blockchain and ask how many Bitcoins do I have, and I look at the blockchain to see how many Bitcoins you have, we both come up with the same number, provably and cryptographically secure, and that's the blockchain.
So how did so many people get involved in the blockchain to create that mass that makes it so difficult for anybody to corrupt or to circumvent that process?
Well, it was the rise of Bitcoin is a study that proves so many people wrong. It the basic essence of Bitcoin was to provide a reward in Bitcoin itself for the people that contribute their computer systems to make the technology secure. And in the very beginning, it was only the most nerdy crypto guys that were into it. But as they played with it over a year or two, and they proved that these values that they were collecting in their addresses were secure, and they could transfer them to other people, and that was secure. And the more they could prove that it was secure, the more they started to think, well, maybe these things actually have a value besides our games that we're really playing here. And then at one point in time, some guy in Florida posted on one of the forums, I will give 10,000 Bitcoins to anyone who can provide me 2 pizzas. And somebody in England purchased 2 pizzas, made some phone calls, figured out how to get 2 pizzas to the fellow with offering the 10,000 Bitcoins, and got him the Papa John's pizzas, and the fellow sent his Bitcoin, and that was the first commercial transaction that we're aware of on the Bitcoin blockchain.
So now
that 10,000 Bitcoins, by the way, now is worth
a lot of
somewhere
money,
around $2.6 million.
Yeah,
So those were really expensive pizzas.
it's about $260 a Bitcoin right now, I believe, isn't it?
Yes.
Somewhere in that range. Well, now, so
Yes.
my understanding is that the recorded exchanges live forever, and once they're recorded in the system, they will always be there. So this transaction could literally be traced back to its roots. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's there in the blockchain. For the people that are interested, you can find the actual address and look at it.
So how does a person actually go look up one of these ledgers, one of these blockchains, and walk through that? Is there a source that anybody can do this? Do you have to be a magician? How do you do this?
Well, it helps to be a magician. That's almost always useful. But there are some websites that they call blockchain explorers, and blockchain.info is one of the earliest. And if you go to that website, you can search for particular addresses, and it will provide you the Bitcoin transaction and break it all down. And that's where being a magician will help you, because those of us that have been in the space for a long time can look at that display and really understand everything on it. If you're new to Bitcoin, it'll be a little daunting. But there are plenty of articles, and you can learn to do this.
So how many people are estimated now to be sustaining or operating, managing, maintaining this blockchain?
Oh, well, there are about there's a tremendous amount of hashing power, and I should have probably reviewed it before I got online to see what the current numbers are. But it's the equivalent of almost a year's supply of supercomputers. That much computing power right now that's involved in securing the Bitcoin blockchain. It's really, really rather massive. And then as far as the number of people, we know that there's about 6,000 to 7,000 people that are running what we call a full node. And a full node is a complete copy of everything in Bitcoin and doing all the mathematics to verify and validate every single item in that entire blockchain. And so there's about 7,000 people.
Well, what's to keep somebody like Google or any other major big data operator from taking this over, corrupting it, bringing it down? Well, what's to keep that from happening?
Well, there's 2 things that work in the favor of Bitcoin against such an attack. The first one is that it is a worldwide system. There are people running Bitcoin nodes in China, in Russia, in Europe, in the US, South America, in Africa. Australia is a big hotbed of Bitcoin activity. And so the more people that are involved, the more difficult it is for some party to move in and disrupt it, because you basically have to get everyone that's involved to get on board another alternative. The second thing is, all that computing power that I described that's in Bitcoin, it's all very, very, very specialized computing power. And so somebody like Google would actually have to buy hardware in order to try to take over the network by brute force. And it really doesn't buy Google much to do that. It doesn't buy a big corporation much to do that. So,
well, just in the world of conspiracy and theory, would that theoretically be possible to do?
Oh yeah, it's theoretically possible to do. Bitcoin is still, as big as Bitcoin is, and it really does have a massive amount of computing power and increasingly a lot of investment and everything. It's still, on the scale of things, fairly small. take two stealth bombers, and the government has spent more than the entire Bitcoin network is worth by actually probably something like 10 times more.
Right.
And so there's not a lot of money there for a huge entity to come in and step in, but they can't do it without being visible. So it's not like somebody could step in like that and pretend they weren't doing it.
Yes.
It's
So
very
there's the transparency that's really at the heart of the whole theory and concept of it, and that's sort
Absolutely.
of that's what's gaining so much inertia and momentum at this point in time.
Absolutely.
So Factum, what does it do using its own version of a blockchain? What is that about?
Well, yeah, Factum is a very, very interesting uh, system. At least I believe so. It is my brainchild, and I've managed to convince a lot of people to get on board and support the effort. And so we have a fairly large team now. But the idea is if I look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin solves the problem of a coin. You know, I can send you Bitcoin. We can prove that you got the Bitcoin and I don't have it, and nobody can copy it. I can't send the same Bitcoin to you and somebody else. The system manages all of that, so that Bitcoin itself is very secure. But there are other things that I might like to secure. Like I would like perhaps to do settlement between one bank and another bank. You know, we've provided your customers this much money, says Bank A, and Bank B says, well, we've supplied this much money for your customers, and they figure out what the difference is, and they do this thing called settlement. But settlement is very difficult because it requires trust of a lot of systems, and it involves money. And anytime you have a system that involves money in computers, you have to make very sure that nobody is changing anything or altering anything or diverting anything, because that's just a way to steal a lot of money. So if I could use Bitcoin technology to secure data, information, and allow applications to use it as a verification and validation layer for the transactions they're already making, then I can vastly reduce the cost of things like settlement, things like auditing a subcontractor, auditing business processes, all of these things, because once that data has been placed inside of Factum, it's secured by the Bitcoin blockchain, and you can't ever change it without anybody. It's not that you can't change the data, but if you change the data, everybody will know you changed the
So
data. We know what the right data is.
it's a distributed form of data integrity is really what it boils
Right.
down to. The Forbes article that came out here a couple of days ago was specifically addressing how data integrity in its many forms and applications for creating and improving provenance of things and such as that has wide and broad applications in business and finances such as that. And that Bitcoin is disruptive not only in its purity as a coin, but that it is now causing everybody to think in terms of a distributed accounting process, which is fundamentally changing the way we do business and have done business. And the intermediaries, such as the banks, which really perform the role of guaranteeing the data integrity, that's really all they serve that function of, stand the potential of being disintermediated like everybody else has been through the internet. So I suspect
Well,
that's got people scared. What do you think?
Well, actually, banks are incredibly interested in the blockchain technology because when I described settlement earlier, that's a very, very expensive process that they have to do on a near real time basis all the time. Whether
Right.
they give us our money in real time, that's another question. They're going to wait 3 days before they let go of your check, but they know about the settlement very quickly, and it's going to get quicker. And
And they need the
honestly,
audit trail, basically, in the event of some sort of failure, that they have some way to go back and absolutely audit something in a very efficient manner.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, and they need to audit things that aren't even money.
Right.
Like, for example, if you have people that are hired into the financial system, certain background checks have to be performed, and certain questions have to be asked. Certain qualifications have to be met for that individual, and that there is essentially a vetting and hiring process. But that's not an auditable process today. but these people, once hired, become very critical in the whole process of settling funds and handling funds. And so, like for instance, just tellers, for somebody that you talk to every day, there are actually regulations for background checks for tellers. But how do I audit that those background checks are done?
Right.
And so, if you can create a immutable audit trail where once you've placed data into that audit trail, no one can change it, then you can say, did you talk to did you do a background check? Well, there could be a hash in that. Well, I'm not going to get into hashes, but there can essentially be a fingerprint of the fact that you did the background check, of the data you got back from the company that you used for the background check, and the whole entire process. And then later, at any point in time, a auditor like the Federal Reserve or some other entity that has responsibility for the behavior of the banks, they can come in and audit some small percentage of these audit trails and get a statistical certainty that the bank is either following the regulations or they're not.
Well, it's really opening up the whole concept of distributed data accountability, which
Right.
we have not currently have any sort of systems. And so what we could be seeing is a wide-scale replacement of these old systems with this more transparent and open distributed accounting and auditing capabilities.
Yeah, and this sounds really, really complicated, but let's do something that everybody can kind of get their heads around. Let's look at the creative process for writing a song. The copyright is an artist's means of getting income for their creative work, and occasionally they can be challenged. Did they write the song, or did they steal the song from someone else? But if you have an audit trail of the creative process behind which you created a song, you now come into court with a immutable proof that at these points in time in the past, there were these versions and that version and this version, and you can look at all the components as they developed over time until you came up with the song.
Which would apply to all intellectual property, patents, trademarks, the whole thing. So let's talk a little bit about the BitCoin conference in Texas. Where is it at? How's it going? What's coming up next?
It is in Austin, Texas. We've had two so far, one in 2014 and one in 2015. Usually close to South by Southwest, either before or after. In 2014 we had it before South by Southwest. 2015 we had it just afterwards. And it's a conference where we bring in some of the brightest minds in the industry, discussing things like how you apply Bitcoin technology to make charities more secure and transparent, and ensure that the money that you donate actually goes to the services and and to support the efforts that you donated that money for. All that kind of transparency that the blockchain can provide. There's just so many applications, and so the Texas Bitcoin Conference explores all of them. All of the variations and flavors of this technology.
Well, I think that's great. It's a very worthwhile project. I know that some of the media, and in particular, I was tickled by Bloomberg and one of the anchors' characterization as the Bitcoin people being a lot of crazies driving around in clown cars. I thought that was affirmation in itself that Bitcoin's here to stay and become a very prominent and dominant force in the world. But Paul, thank you very much for being with us today, and
Yes.
We wish you best of luck with the conference. I hope to make it down there myself in 2016. So we thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having us.
And that is really a nice summary about the entire world of Bitcoin. The blockchain is a fascinating and powerful new technology that is emerging from the internet. The internet of money is what we're really seeing emerge at this point in time. And I think that it's safe to say that Bitcoin is likely to continue to grow and evolve and gain a little bit more traction as time goes along. But the blockchain in particular as a concept is coming fully into its own and is something that you're going to see in every form of business and economics and finance as the future goes along. This is Talking Points. I'm David Matthews, and thank you for joining us today.